Thanks everyone for joining us with our Insurance Leadership Podcast episode. We're coming at you from Tampa, Florida at the ICMG conference, and I'm privileged to sit here with Chris Ellis, who's the CEO and founder of Thatch. Thatch is administering and processing ICHRA implementations for group clients. So something that I've been very interested in for the last few years. And Chris is a new father as well, so I want to congratulate you on that. We were talking about sleeping arrangements or lack thereof a little bit. That being said, Chris, Let's get to know you a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your background and what inspired you to found this company.
Well, like most people in the health insurance industry, I actually started my career somewhere completely different and found my way into it. I started my career actually in science. I was a cancer researcher at MIT many years ago now. I always was really interested in healthcare, always wanted to make an impact in that area. Kind of found the science side of it once I was deep into it. I had this moment where I said, I don't think I could do this for the rest of my life. I've always been interested in companies, and that led me to actually join a startup. And I always had this idea that one day I'd found my own company, but had no idea how to do that coming out of grad school. So I joined a startup, started the sales team for a health tech company called Sophia Genetics that was selling into health systems, and going kind of door to door, knocking on doors, meeting with medical directors, and selling clinical software. It really opened my eyes to the fact that the way healthcare is paid for makes just as much of a difference in patient outcomes and the broader system than actually the clinical aspect itself. And that got me really intrigued by kind of the mechanism by which you pay for healthcare, which is fundamentally health insurance. And that kind of brought me down a path. I worked at a biotech company after that, but it kind of brought me down a path that eventually led to learning about ICHRA, or the Individual Coverage Health Reimbursement Arrangement, which is a bit of a mouthful. They keep getting worse after like HSA and FSA. But it was a really cool idea. Rather than a company having to choose the benefits for their employees, instead they could give them money and they could choose it themselves. And I was intrigued by this idea that if you could align the incentives towards the consumer, you could actually create incentives to build a system that people really loved, as opposed to the way that it works today, which in some cases, isn't always the best for the patient. They're kind of like the last rung on the totem pole after the carriers or the pharmaceutical firms. And so when I learned about that law, it was actually around that time now, 4 or 5 years ago, that I met my co-founder, Adam, and he came from a company called Stripe. It's a fintech company, built a lot of payment solutions. Actually, many of their customers were insurance companies, but also products you use every day, like powered by Stripe, like Uber or whatever it might be. And when we met, we had an instant connection. He came from a fintech background. My background was healthcare. ICHRA is kind of the perfect union of those two because it's a financial product and a healthcare thing. And so that was kind of how we originally got into it, really kind of intrigued by the idea, wanted to build something of our own, and kind of had this perfect union of our backgrounds to kind of go do it.
It's fantastic. So I don't know if you're familiar. So at Morgan White, we work with a lot of brokers across the country. Yeah. And, when ICHRA kind of came around and I was very interested, kind of much like yourself, in how this was going to affect everybody and were brokers going to embrace this. And what I found was the challenge with brokers was they, especially a group broker that's traditionally just used to, I'm selling insurance to a group and I move on with my life. And, we explain these benefits of these handful of plans and we move on. So it looks like a Mount Everest for them to say, hey, this is a 30-man group, and now I have 30 individuals that could buy 300 different plans from different brokers, depending on the state, obviously. Yeah. So, I saw a lot of them kind of shying away, like, how do we do this? And then on top of that, how do they pay for it?
Yeah.
And I think, really that's really what companies like Thatch are doing to help these brokers. So I guess it leads me into that question is what are you guys doing to really kind of capitalize on this trend, and how are you helping the groups or the brokers deliver these solutions?
Absolutely. When we were first getting started, that was one of the biggest pieces of feedback we heard from brokers, which is, this is actually way more work, and how do we get paid for it? The individual commissions.
More work, less pay, right?
Yeah. And look, brokers, their incentives are simple. like anybody's, they want to do less work and make more money.
Sure, right.
But the early implementations were really tough because they involved oftentimes the ICHRA administrator handling maybe the payment or some aspects of the administration, but then throwing the enrollments over the fence and the advising of plans to brokers who may not be trained on the individual plans, who don't actually necessarily have the capabilities to enroll these individuals in these plans, and have this pretty significant administrative overhead. And then they'd be earning the individual commissions, which are less valuable than the group commissions, right? Yeah. Individual, depending on the state, 15, 20, 25 bucks per member per month, but that's, quite a bit shy of what, can be a little bit more than that, 30, 40 bucks percent of premiums, 4% of premiums on the group side. And so what we realized pretty early on is like health insurance is predominantly in America distributed through brokers. And we don't want to replace brokers. We want to do all of our distribution through brokers. And that means that we have to create a system that aligns their incentives to sell ICHRA. And that means that we have to figure out how to make it less work. And we need to figure out a system that makes it more money.
That's right.
And so how do we do that? It's pretty, it turned out to be actually relatively simple. We act kind of like an ICHRA general agent, where we handle a lot of the back office functions for the broker involving, payments, reconciliation, enrollments, some aspects of the plan advisement. We can interface with the carriers to ensure that the binder payment's been made and so forth. And so the broker gets to shine by using the tools that we've developed to actually construct the optimal ICHRA quote, to find that cost arbitrage, to tune the dials to the right levers that allow the customer to save money and access comparable coverage. But we're taking that kind of pretty significant fixed cost out of serving the group. So they can send once they've aligned on the quote, which we help them do, they send the employer the invite link, and then boom, they're good to go. Like the broker doesn't have to do any more work after that. And that includes that renewal. The renewal conversation is super simple. It's like, hey, the average increase in the individual market is 4%. To stay in line with market, go up 4%. Or if you want to go in line with inflation, that's 3%, whatever it might be, or your wage increases. So the renewal conversation is simpler, the onboarding implementation is simpler. And then the payment piece, like a level funded plan where a broker charges per employee per month directly to the customer, we actually help facilitate that, where a broker can set the price that they want to charge, which can be, in some cases, actually more lucrative than getting paid a commission on a fully insured group plan. And so in that way, we've helped brokers kind of make the same amount or sometimes more money and do less work. And that's why it's our fastest growing channel. We went from having, 1 or 2 brokers referring now to hundreds. We'll have, by the end of this year, thousands. And so we're extremely bullish on this strategy. And it all comes down to, at the end of the day, making their lives easier and empower them.
So I'm curious. So you mentioned, I get it. You're empowering the broker, but you're also getting them to the 5-yard line, and you're saying, hey, here's a link. This goes to your group, and I'm assuming the member at that point, the employee, is making their own choices based on your technology. And what was your challenges? How did you guys go and really research the member experience that what you were going to build? Because I know you're in a space where the technology just doesn't really exist. There's not a whole lot of copycat you can do when you're the first guy doing this stuff, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. It kind of comes down to, the advice I like to give to entrepreneurs, which is solve a problem that you have yourself and build a product that you want to use yourself. And what's really nice is we have a bunch of really amazing software engineers who are Thatch users who went through iterations of selecting a plan, and they said, you know what, this was pretty confusing if you just drop me into a portal that has 60 different options. So let's actually build a recommendation algorithm that can narrow it down to 2 based on your demographic data, based on your propensity to pay and the employer allowance, based on the expected utilization, based on the doctors that you're seeing. Oh, now I can actually, the only person I care about is my primary care physician I've seen the last 20 years, Jerry. I'll go choose a plan that covers Jerry. And by the way, since I know he's covered, I might choose a cheaper plan, like an HMO, a narrow network, so I can save a little bit of money and see the doctor I want. And so actually having our own team be users of the product help us shortcut a lot of the actual learning process because we had a bunch of people who are like, this needs to be better. Here's what we can do.
Yeah.
Now, there's obviously still a lot of room to continue improving and getting better. And a lot of it has to do with the kinetics of the individual markets or the employees are in. And so that's another thing we tell brokers is like, hey, ICHRA is not the end-all, be-all solution for every customer, and you need to be moving all your customers over to group coverage, or from group coverage to ICHRA tomorrow. And in fact, when we hear some of the criticisms about the ICHRA market, it often comes down to like, hey, I quoted this group and ICHRA was more expensive, or I quoted this group and they didn't have any PPOs available in their network. And therefore, the broker might say, wow, the ICHRA market just isn't ready for prime timers. But that's kind of, to me, like saying, trying to make a general characterization about like the weather in the US. Like the US is a hot country, or the US is cold. It's like, here we are sitting in Tampa where it's like 70 degrees, it's sunny, it's beautiful. I see the ocean outside, the bay. I went for a walk last night. It was like absolutely gorgeous. I'm like, Tampa is amazing. But meanwhile, right now in upstate New York, there's people who are like freezing their butts off and they're like not having a good time.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
And ICHRA is the same way, right? There are some regions where it's a really strong fit. The kinetics of the individual market are a good fit. The groups and the price that they can get on a corresponding small group plan is a good fit. And then there's other places where it's not. And so one of the things that we try to do to help empower brokers is actually help make that determination of like, maybe if folks are in this certain region, or if they're this type of customer, they're much more likely to be a good fit than if they're over here. And so I wouldn't waste time over here.
Right.
We don't want to be all things for all people. We want to help you at the end of the day keep more customers, win new deals that you otherwise wouldn't, and in the process, bring innovative solutions to your clients that maybe the guy next door isn't bringing to the table. And so that's kind of the approach that we've taken.
Now, you said your broker channel is kind of growing in leaps and bounds now. Is Thatch generally your broker's first kind of delve into ICHRA? Or are you guys getting these seasoned brokers that have kind of been doing it maybe with someone else or maybe even attempting, God bless them, to do it themselves without some technology backing it, which I don't even know if that's possible, to be honest with you. But I mean, are you guys kind of their first experience with offering ICHRA to their customers?
The vast majority of the time they've never quoted a group before, and they don't even know where to start. And that's why I was kind of saying earlier, I think there's some ICHRA companies out there going like, hey, ICHRA is going to be 100% of the market and it's going to happen tomorrow and you need to be, and kind of like this somewhat like zealot kind of approach. And actually we do get plenty of brokers who come having worked with another company and wanting to try something different. And when we're talking with the broker, we're like, look, you don't need to go quote your whole book on ICHRA tomorrow, but who are the 3 groups you lost last year because they got a renewal that was too high for them to stomach? Or who are the 3 groups that are most likely to lose if they get a double-digit renewal? And let's start there, right? What is the shape of those customers? Here's examples of folks that have had a really good experience going to ICHRA. And I think that kind of thinking about it more as I think one of the things that when we're talking to somebody new who's dipping their toes into the waters is like a level funded plan, it's going to be a good fit for some customers and it's not going to be the right fit for other customers. And the most important thing we can do is to empower them to understand where it's going to be a good fit and where it's not, so that they can look good for their customer. And because we don't want them to go present this, unattractive quote to one of their groups and talk up ICHRA and it's like, oh, it doesn't work out. Like we want to make them successful, and that means also sharing some of the insights that we've developed over the past few years.
So, obviously I would look at ICHRA as somewhat disruptive. I think you'd probably agree with that. So, anytime you're disrupting a market, you can obviously get a little blowback, right? So what are you doing to address maybe skepticism, misconceptions, anything that you're getting maybe from brokers that maybe isn't so positive towards what you're doing? How are you guys addressing that?
Absolutely. And I think there's been plenty of technology companies and perhaps will remain unnamed for the purposes of this podcast, but I think we all know who they are, where they came out and were like, we're going to drink your milkshake. That's right. Yep. and like, we're the wave of the future and all this stuff. And one thing that I've reflected on kind of being a student of history and also just recognizing the fact that the relationships that brokers have with their customers go beyond that of a vendor slinging insurance. They're often people that they know each other over a long period of time. They trust each other, maybe they went to high school together, and they're like genuinely concerned about the welfare and well-being of the people that work at those companies. And that relationship that these individuals have built over a long period of time, I don't think can or should be disrupted. And so when I think about a disruptive technology, I don't think about it through the lens of disrupting relationships or blowing things up or anything like that. I think about it as how can we empower the people who are already selling health insurance, which is largely brokers, but we also have partnerships with payroll companies. For example, we just went live with QuickBooks, and we're basically embedding ICHRA into the QuickBooks platform for 1.4 million small businesses. We're getting dozens of companies a week signing up. It's amazing. We're working directly with health plans to meet them where they are, whether it might be building net new integrations so that they can get better visibility into their ICHRA membership, whether in some cases they want to distribute through some of their unique channels. And so when we think about disruptive technology, we're saying, actually, how can we make our workflows and our product, our APIs composable in a way that makes it really, really easy for other people to sell it and want to sell it. And I think it's much more of a compelling arc of distribution if we are able to empower other people to disrupt, the people who are like already in it, who have the relationships that have built it, then for us to come in and say, we know better than you, or we've got a better, it's like, because we don't. At the end of the day, we are a technology player, we have great technology, we see a fit in some cases for ICHRA for some customers, but at the end of the day, like that determination, that decades of experience so forth that our distributors have, that really matters to us. And so we say, let this be an arrow in your quiver. Let us be kind of the Robin Hood to your Batman or the Batmobile, and you're gonna do amazing things, but we're gonna do amazing things with you and not disrupt you.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, that's a fantastic answer. I think that's great. I mean, hey, makes me want to tell everyone, hey, you go work with this guy, right? So, well, look, let's pivot a little bit, because this is the Insurance Leadership Podcast. We talked a lot about insurance. Let's talk a little bit about leadership. Sure. So, obviously you've founded this company. Mm-hmm. I know you recently were successful in getting a decent amount of funding. Congratulations on that. Obviously, you got to have that to build a tech platform, right? Yeah, absolutely. But so, obviously you've got a lot of people to believe your vision with what you're doing. So I'm curious from what was your approach to raise capital, and what lessons did you learn as going through this? And I assume there was probably some bumps in the road getting there, right? Oh
yeah. Yeah, I mean, if they told me in advance how hard and what a pain it would be, I don't know if I would have done it. But I will say, kind of like I was saying earlier about the importance of relationships, it's just as important when you look at raising capital, because at the end of the day, people are not really investing in your idea. They're certainly not investing in your business plan. They're investing in you and the team that you built. And that means that when you come to the table with investors, the most important thing is, are you doing the things that you said you would do last time at a hopefully pretty high rate? And do they believe that you have what it takes to continue to recruit the stellar people that are going to need to bring this to life? Because at the end of the day, tactics can evolve. Like, I look at our product 12 months ago compared to today, the product has evolved. I think about 12 months from now, the product will be a lot different. These things change, like the business model changes, the product changes, all these things. But the people are the same. They're the constant throughout. And so I think one of the things that we really were deliberate about was, who do we want to work with and why? And map that out far in advance of even chatting with them, talking to a bunch of people. And by taking that approach of really identifying the firms but specifically the individuals at the firms that we most resonated with, based on their writings or what we've heard from other founders, and going and seeking them out and building that relationship over a period of time, that allowed us to bring that human element, the relationship, into the equation, so that when they see our amazing business traction, whatever, we grew 8x year over year, or when they see, customers are raving about it, and like that they can map that back not onto an Excel spreadsheet that they're punching in and saying, we're going to make all this money in 10 years, but to a person that they believe is telling them the truth, a person that they believe is going to execute on the things that they say that they're going to do, a person that can recruit the people that are going to need to execute on that mission. And that's where I think building those relationships has been really helpful.
So based on that, would you say the people that have invested in you, are they active in your business model and your path, or is it more, I've given you money because I trust you and you do your thing? I mean, have they taken an active role in Thatch? No,
it's a great question. So a lot of the advice you hear out there is like 90% of venture capitalists add no value. Now, in my experience, that hasn't been true. Okay. And so part of the kind of rationale I think about for us, like, we sought out investors who had worked with companies in a similar space, or in fintech or in health tech. We sought out investors who had a track record of, enabling their portfolio companies to be successful. And by aligning that up front, I think we got disproportionate value out the back end after we started working with them. They were always here when we have, strategic questions about should we do this or that to help us close candidates, even introductions to key distributors or customers. And so we've been fortunate that they've been very engaged in the process afterwards. But I think that's more of a reflection of like what you come into it with than anything else. Because I know a lot of founders out there, they're like, I'll take money at the best price,
right?
for the best terms, and then a few years later, they actually kind of regret it because maybe that best price was overpriced. And how are they going to meet that valuation? Or maybe that best price was from a partner who is actually has a different set of incentives than you. Maybe they're trying to, turn it over in 3 years, and it puts a lot of pressure on you to change the way you build the company. And so I think aligning with patient, long-term partners who see, they want to believe, kind of like us, they believe that over a long enough time horizon that ICHRA is not going to be this like niche insurance product that's arbitraging short-term group and individual prices, but that it's going to be a meaningful component of the healthcare ecosystem. And so they want to back teams and companies that see that vision over the long term as well.
Right. But you took the initiative to do your research on them first, right?
I did. Yeah. I had a whole spreadsheet and organized it alphabetically and reached out. So, and that's what I think, for leaders, whether you're raising, $400,000 or $40 million, that's a very important decision that you have to make. And so, put a lot of thought into who those partners are going to be.
Absolutely. Well, look, let's wrap it up. I want to ask you one more question on kind of the leadership side. So, as the founder and leader of Thatch, what advice would you give to other emerging leaders that are in the insurance or tech, insurance tech? That word always kind of stumbles me up. Like insure tech, who are looking to make an impact. What would you say? What lessons have kind of shaped your journey thus far with Thatch?
My biggest piece of advice is probably ignore most advice you get from experts. And that might mean it for me as well. But the reason I say that is that if you are starting a company, or you're trying to launch a new business line, or you're doing anything that is remotely risky, the odds are that there's going to be really smart people who don't think that's a good idea. And in fact, if everybody thought it was a good idea, then everybody would be doing it. And there would actually be no incremental benefit to starting that company or launching that new product line or do whatever. You have to have some insight into the world, into the product, into the customer base, whatever it might be. You have to have some insight that not everybody in the world agrees with you on. And when I think about our journey, when we first talked to brokers, for example, a lot of folks who had tried the early iterations of ICHRA, they told us, guys, the business model doesn't work. We do more work, we make less money. We'll never sell it. And it's like, that was true. Like that was true at the time with what they had done. But what they didn't appreciate, for example, was that that could be true at that time, but over time, if we can find a solution to that problem, then it could be something different and the incentives could be aligned. Or I think about, even major health plans. We're saying we want to keep the individual book an individual, and we want to keep the group book in group, and we'll never have a meaningful play in ICHRA. And then 18 months later, they're coming back to us about, okay, how do we distribute ICHRA to more of our through more of our captive agents and so forth. And so having the conviction to really kind of hold true to what you believe, despite the fact that very smart people that you perhaps respect or that are in a position of greater authority than you are telling you you shouldn't do that, it's not a good idea, is kind of that guts is kind of what it takes to do something meaningful. And I think that trickles down into the way that you really start your initiative and the way that you recruit a team, which is being really clear about what you stand for and what you believe in. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about making money, or it's not just about, doing some cool thing. It's like, in our case, our mission is to build a healthcare system people love. One of the very first things that we did was to write down what our core values were and what we stood for. I remember there's an often, it's probably his least known work, but Mark Twain wrote a book about Joan of Arc, the young woman, 1,000 years ago, who led the French armies to victory against the English after they had been invaded in their homelands. And it's a great book, and he considered it his best work. And one of the things that came out of it that I was really interested in, and it was very well documented, a lot of primary sources. And but one of the things that was really interesting is kind of paint the picture of the times. France was pretty down on its luck. England came in, invaded, they won this big battle, and they were increasingly capturing more territory. And for 100 years, the French army had this reputation that if they see if they see an English soldier, they'd run away. They had this reputation that they could never win, that it was impossible, and it was just a matter of time before England invaded and controlled everything. And Joan of Arc, she didn't know anything about war or battle or anything like that. Right. She was new to the, but she had this belief that France as a nation should be free from kind of the dominion of the English, free from the kind of the pillaging and the murdering that was happening. She petitioned over a long process the leadership in France to eventually say, hey, let's lead this army and let's go take back some of the territories that were lost. But when she was in the camp, she didn't say, okay, here's the strategy. We're going to go take this building and then we're going to go on this wall. Actually, the very first thing that she did was she walked through and she noticed that everybody in the camp was gambling and playing cards and dice, and that they brought, women into the camp and all this sorts of stuff. And she outlined all of that. She was like, you have to pray every morning with me. You're not allowed to gamble or play dice. She kind of put together a series of values that said, hey, we're actually standing for something bigger than just going to war.
Set the tone.
She set the tone for the camp. And when they went in their first battle, the English didn't recognize them because they were motivated and glorified and more energized than kind of any prior one. And they just ended up winning battle after battle after that. Not because she had a superior strategy, not because it was the right time. It's been 100 years. They lost every war. But I think because she was really clear about what she stood for and what they were trying to accomplish together. And she wrote that down. So I think when any leader is trying to do something new, build something from scratch, it's really important to articulate upfront why and what you stand for, because you're not going to necessarily have a lot of luck doing something hard and recruiting people to build this great initiative if nobody really understands why they're there, or if it's just about kind of we're trying to make some money or trying to add some revenue. It has to be about something more meaningful. So that's the advice I'd give to leaders who are listening to the show.
So be Joan of Arc, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's all you need to do.
Fantastic. Well, Chris, we appreciate you joining us today on the podcast. It was really good. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.
This was fun.
And for everyone out there, we appreciate you joining us as well. We'll see you soon.